Right. The art of biography is different from geography. Geography is about maps. Biography is about chaps. You got it? That is what's called a Clerehu, which is a 4-line poem rhyming AABB, just in case you know it. Okay. Biography goes as far back in texts as Egyptian funerary structures, or possibly even earlier to the Mesopotamian world of Gilgamesh. Like all art forms, it has its fortunes have waxed and waned over the centuries, and it returned to us with the hagiographies of the Catholic Church, the greatly polished stories about the lives of men who were being proposed for sainthood. Then came James Boswell and his seminal biography of Samuel Johnson, the great man of letters in 18th century England. Spoken of variously as the first modern biography, and sometimes as the greatest of all biographies, this work was 28 years labour for the young Boswell. He was 22 when he first met Johnson, who spent all those years cozying up to initially the 54-year-old man of letters. Boswell's note-keeping from their every meeting was so detailed that Johnson remarked that one would think that this man has been hired to spy on me. Complex notes were made and kept by Boswell on all of their conversations over this long period. And I quote, "Conversations fueled with vast quantities of port that ranged from promiscuity. Boswell was spectacularly wanton, Johnson not so. Printers, adultery, birds, primogeniture, marriage, crowds, booksellers, Americans, the plays of Sheridan, bad poets, fame, wigs, warfare, and writing books." Boswell was, again I quote, an unsafe companion who never scrupled to repay the most liberal hospitality with the basest violations of confidence. The end product was more than just a recital of facts and dates. It was a personal and intimate record of Johnson's public and private life, unmatched at the time, and still considered by many to be the best and the first modern biography. Biography is the weaving of personalities into the warp and weft of the flow of history. History without a considered understanding of the people enduring it is empty, bereft. Quote, 2 million people died in the Battle of Stalingrad. Quote, 72 people were killed today when Israeli tanks opened fire on food queues in Gaza. Devastating facts, but they are statistics stripped of the horror and the suffering of those whose blood was needed to make these statistics real. Likewise, biography without social context is interesting but incomplete. Charles Dickens wrote 15 major novels. Interesting, but without the full story. That his parents and younger siblings spent months in a debtor's prison, and he then, at the age of 13, worked in a sweatshop sticking labels on tins of shoe blacking. All of this materially affected his later writing. Biography without social context is also only part of the full story of history. As Carlyle wrote on Boswell's biography of Dr. Johnson, quote, "One wants to see more than facts from histories and biographies, but also the life of man in England, what men did, thought and suffered and enjoyed." 120 years later, another quality of biography emerged with Lytton Strackey's book, Eminent Victorians, in which he began the debunking tradition in biography, the process of exposing fault, the opposite of the hagiography that we have mentioned. This is, however, to be an occasional exercise for the biographer, who should, in Carlyle's words about Boswell, quote, "He had the great good sense to admire and attach himself to Dr. Johnson. His feelings to Johnson were reverence, the highest of human feelings." There is a final consideration of biography that should be mentioned. Here I quote from Jan Swafford's monumental biography of Beethoven, quote, "When it comes to history and biography, I believe submission to the objective facts is, for all its limitations, what the discipline is about. Interpretation comes in second at best, and then very often a distant second. A biography is mainly a narrative of life, not an interpretation of it. I believe that most of the time, interpretations in a biography are best left to you, gentle reader. I supply the material, and you work it out. So there we have 5 pointers to a good biography. Firstly, detailed research is unavoidable. First-hand sources are desirable where obtainable, and the extensive use of second-hand archival sources is fundamental. Secondly, a biography must depict all aspects of the subject, his or her life and character, not just his or her special area of creativity. Thirdly, it must occupy, honestly, some territory between hagiography and debunking. Weaknesses of character are to be exposed, but respect and even reverence is acceptable also. Fourthly, description of the subject and his or her work is preferential to interpretation of this work. And fifthly, contextualization, the placing of the subject into the group of inspirational contemporaries that he or she had, and into the society that nurtured and or attacked his or her creativity, is necessary. Now we come to the paradox of the biographer. And this is, who would be willing to spend 2 or more years working on an immense study of the life of another person if he or she did not at least admire that person, or, as is more likely, deeply respect that person? And if that is the case, how can the biographer establish the distance between subject and biographer that objective judgment requires? How does one expose fault in recording the life of someone one greatly respects? Excuse me. When I finished my first book, Apartheid Stalingrad, which was about the most important political developments in the history of my little place on this earth, Port Elizabeth, I decided to then write of the most important cultural development in that area, which was the time of Athol Fugard, John Carney, and Winston Nxuba. Carney and Nxuba were the 2 most prominent of New Brighton's serpent players, the black theatre group that worked with Fugard. I read extensively, and it became clear that there was a comprehensive literature on Fugard, but little on the serpent players, his fellow paddlers in this river, and the people who had done so much to make Fugard the sensation that he became: Yvonne Bryceland, Barney Simon, the Serpents, Zakes Mackay, and Ross Devonish were, with the exception of Barney Simon, almost ignored by the literature. Bryceland, who Fugard told me was the most important provocation, that was his word, in his long career, merited 2 footnotes in the most recent and detailed of the 3 biographical works on Fugard. And of the onrush of apartheid during his most creative years, and the cascading tyranny of censorship over his career, there has been little written. To again use the words that I did at the beginning of this note, his remarkable work has been hardly contextualized at all in the extensive literature about him. I went to Stellenbosch to see him. I mentioned that I had begun to write about him and the Serpents. He asked me what line I was to take, for writing about Fugard is a well-trodden road. There are, I believe, about 100 theses out there, of which I've had the horror of reading possibly 30. And the Amazi archive in Grahamstown of Makanda has over 4,000 pieces on him alone. I told him that I wanted to concentrate on contextualization. Yvonne Bryceland, Barney, the Serpents, Zakes, Ross, and the political and legislative environment in which they had been forced to operate. His reply was reassuring. Rory, take those beautiful people and put them on the center of the stage. That is what I have now spent 2 years trying to do. And have I succeeded? Do I have a reasonable draft biography on my hands? The answer is no, for I have failed in 2 of the criteria I have outlined. Firstly, my access to original sources has been too limited. Fugard himself, despite heroic attempts to help, is 91 and his memory just isn't reliable anymore. And it caused him great anguish trying to find out facts that I was desperately wanting to get from him. So I had to abandon that. And much of what I have written about now is over 50 years ago now. Only John Carney and George Lucy of the Serpents are still with us. Carney is tied up to a contract to deliver a biography and was unavailable. Lucy was wonderful, and therefore, thereafter, unfortunately, dead men make difficult interviewees. And secondly, my second problem is, if, as Boswell mentioned, questions need to be asked and answered about the private trilogy, sex, depression, and drink, again, I have failed. Drink, yes. Fugard's chaotic period at the end of the 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s is well recorded, and I did dwell on that. But depression and sex, no. I do have some information which I have determinedly avoided. Clearly, I have fallen short of the biographer's paradox. When I took the decisions not to rummage around in Fugard's dirt bins, I realized that I was abandoning the possibility of a biography and instead was telling the story of Fugard, his friends and their times. I found that was okay. Then I got a note from Fugard. He wrote that he was old and unwell, with a young family. He did not feel up to the full biographical peronoscopy. I was happy to reply that neither did I. And I was to tell the story of Ethel Fugard and the Serpent Players, Theatre Against Apartheid, in a limited and respectful way. 6 months later, he was gone. And now I am finished. Finished a story, not a biography. Let me close with a reading from the manuscript. In fact, a reading of the very short introduction of the manuscript. I wrote the introduction 3 or possibly 4 times, beginning with sort of academic stuff that was summarizing what was coming in the text. It was all so boring and so leaden that I just thought, no, I'd rather go for something that Fugard would have liked. And he was an extraordinarily creative writer. He would come in things from all sorts of angles. And so I decided to go all hillbilly with my style. And now I'll read you just the brief beginnings to this work. Tonight, 20th of April 1975, we are going to have one hell of a party. We're in New York, in fact in the Winter Gardens Theatre on Broadway. It is, even by Broadway standards, a big theatre, seating 1,600 people. And tonight, it is going to be full up. Tonight, the Winter Gardens Theatre is hosting the Tony Awards. Maybe a few words of explanation. London and New York are the 2 major centres of English language theatre and possibly of world theatre. Each have about 230 theatres, of which about 40 in each city are clustered into a central theatre district called the West End in London and Broadway in New York. In these districts, real cutting-edge theatrical action happens, and each have annual award ceremonies to celebrate the major theatrical successes of the previous year. In London, these awards are the Laurence Olivier Awards. In New York, well, slightly more complex. For New York, theatres are classified. A Broadway theatre is one that seats more than 500 patrons. An off-Broadway theatre seats between 100 and 500, and an off-Broadway theatre seats under 100. Broadway theatres, the big ones, have a set of annual awards called the Tony Awards. And off-Broadway and off-Broadway theatres are combined, and they qualify for Obie Awards. Both Tony and Obie Awards are managed by the same organization, the American Theatre Wing. The Tony Awards are in fact the Antoinette Perry Awards for Excellence in Broadway Theatre, named after one of the founders of these awards. They have run continuously since 1947 and are the theatrical equivalent of the Emmy Awards for television, the Grammy Awards for music, and the Academy Awards, the Oscars, for cinema. Phew, enough facts. Let's get back to our party. For tonight, the Tony Awards for Broadway shows from 1974 are to be awarded. The guests are pouring in. Beautiful actresses in as little clothing as possible, trying to look younger than they are. Handsome actors in bespoke suits trying to look richer than they are. This is theatre, not cinema. Almost everybody is poor here. But beautiful? Sure. Big names all around. The hosts include Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon, and Angela Lansbury. Playwright Peter Shaffer is here. His play Echo is up for Best Play, Best Actor, Best Director. It stars Anthony Hopkins and Peter Firth, and is directed by the seasoned campaigner John Dexter. It was commissioned by Britain's National Theatre, who brought it from London to Broadway. With all that muscle behind it, it surely is going to be a big winner tonight. Then there's Edward Albee's new play, Seascape, up for Best Play. Henry Fonda and Frank Langella are both up for Best Actor, and Angela Lansbury and Diana Rigg, both of them, are up for Best Actress. It's a full house of stars, and literati on the stage with the red carpet, endless clacking cameras, champagne flowing like Niagara, wonderful food. The party is on. Hello. Who are those three rather scruffy individuals in the corner? 2 black men and 1 white? Why are they here? What is that you said? That they have been nominated for awards? The white guy for Best Play and Best Director, and the black guys for the best performances by an actor in a play? And they are also nominated with the white guy for writing the best play? What? Where are they from? Did you say they're from Port Elizabeth? Where's that? South Africa. Oh yes, the land at the bottom of Africa with gold, diamonds and apartheid. But if they have apartheid, how did 2 black guys and 1 white guy end up coming here together to do what they call protest theatre? Plays about apartheid. Well, then again, how the hell did they get here? You say their names are Athol Fugard, the white dude, and Winston Nchona and John Carney. What drama school did they attend? None, you say? Never been to a drama school? In fact, none of them have a university degree. Heavens, how long have they been in theatre? The white dude, 16 years. The black dude's 9 and 7. Where did they learn theatre? In an abandoned snake pit? Oh, come on, you're shitting me. You say that's true. Well, what theatre have they performed in? You say that the 2 black dudes performed in their first theatre with the stage and lights 2 years ago, and that in their home city, Port Elizabeth, there are 2 or 3 fully equipped theatres, but they can't use them because they're black. You say the 3 of them wrote those 2 plays that are up for Tonys in an abandoned school classroom and a suburban garage. The one play took 18 days to write and the other 11, and they didn't have a written score for the first performance. Koos took Peter Shaffer 5 years. And it is written in their second language. Connie and Nchona speak isiXhosa. And they only began speaking English when they got to school. And they had no budget, no money at all, no state support. And the white guy had his passport taken away for nearly 5 years. And yet, here they are, at the Tony Awards ceremony, nominated for awards. No, man, this is unbelievable. The ceremony is beginning. First up, Best Play. 6 nominations, including these 3 guys for, what is this? Sizwe Bonzi is Dead and the Island? 2 plays? I didn't know you could possibly enter 2 plays for 1 award. What are they about? You say the impact of South Africa's past laws on urbanizing blacks? They made a play out of that? And the second one, about political prisoners in jail putting on Antigone for their fellow prisoners. A bit weird, not so? Surely no hope of an award. This award went to Peter Shaffer and Echoes, which was easy to understand. A big budget play, right in the tradition of the Tony Awards. No such weird stuff from the land of apartheid. Now, Best Director of a Play. Athol Fugard is amongst 6 nominations, which is a great honour, but no, it goes to John Dexter, again from big budget Echoes. Another understandable award, squarely in the Tony tradition. Now for number 3. The Tony Award for Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role in a Play. Both Carney and Nchona are nominated, as one. Never heard of that before. And Henry Fonda is nominated, and Peter Firth from Echoes. Stiff competition, surely. What? Carney and Nchona won? First time in Tony history, 2 actors get the same award, and they take it, and all each of them says to the microphone is, thank you, and they're off the stage. They, 2 young men from Port Elizabeth, have won the most coveted prize in world theatre. And you say all this happened? Man, you're fucking with my head. It's just not possible. But it is possible, and it all happened. That is the story I'm now going to tell you. Grab a mug of coffee, settle down in your most comfortable chair, blanket on your knees and cat on your lap. I'm going to tell you the unbelievable story of Athol Fugard and the Serpent Players, Theatre Against Apartheid. Thank you.